Hello, everyone, and welcome to Autism Stories, where we connect you with amazing people that help autistic adults and teens become more successful. I'm your host, Doug Bletcher, the founder of Autism Personal Coach. Over the holidays, my wife got me a weighted blanket because I'm a pretty restless sleeper and my quality of sleep is not the greatest. This blanket has helped me sleep better, I'm excited to say, but if you have sleep apnea, getting a good night's sleep is more complicated than just buying a weighted blanket. On this episode of Autism Stories, we talk with John Truitt about how sleep apnea affects so many autistic people and what he is doing to try to combat these challenges. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. John, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you very much, Doug, for having me.
I wanted to start and learn, where does your story in the autism community begin?
My story begins about 2 years ago. As far as a diagnosis for me, I was vaguely aware of autism, didn't even really know the term autism spectrum disorder, just really understood autism to be pretty much what's the extreme low functioning side of it. I had a close friend and fraternity brother who has a daughter that is low functioning autistic. So up until 2 years ago, I had a very skewed view of what the spectrum was. Then after diagnosis, kind of came in, and it took me probably, I don't know, 2 or 3 months to even realize, what the Asperger's traits were. I've also been diagnosed with dyslexia, dyscalculia, dyspraxia, communication disorder, and some other things, and we never had any idea I had any of that. So it was a real surprise at 45 years old.
Now, for a long time, you've specialized in supporting dental and medical startups to become successful. What strengths do you feel from being autistic do you feel have helped you in being so successful in this field?
I think there's a couple of parts of that definitely the perseverance and the autistic focus. The technical side of things, in retrospect, has made a huge impact on what I was able to do. Probably the second component of it is with my form of thinking, which is pretty much pattern-based thinking. Having the experience of looking at dental models, medical models, business models, and then overlaying them on top of each other to be able to kind of get the best of all worlds out of it, that's definitely driven predominantly from the Asperger's and possibly a little bit from the dyslexia and things like that. But I see it almost as a vocation. I mean, it's to the point now after 2 years that my view on it is, if you're trying to do anything creative, from whether it's a business or art or music, I feel like neurotypicals are actually at a disadvantage. I honestly don't know how you would be really good at doing any of those things without having some of the Asperger's traits.
You've worked with businesses that have helped people that have sleep apnea, which is something that many autistic people struggle with throughout their lives. What are some of the common challenges that you see for people with sleep apnea have that often go misdiagnosed?
Okay, and this is not specific, obviously, to anybody on the spectrum. This is just in general. The indicators for obstructive sleep apnea are obesity, age, alcohol consumption, and smoking. Those are the things that are going to make sleep apnea come on. The things you can't control age, but you can control whether you drink to a large degree, whether you stand, weight, or smoke. So those are going to be the things that tend to increase your chances of having it. If you're a lady and your neck circumference is 15 and a half or greater, if you're a man and your neck circumference is 17 and a half inches or greater, you're going to tend to also fall in the category of having apnea. Some of the comorbidities associated with it are high blood pressure, myocardial infarction or a heart attack, type 2 diabetes, and stroke are very correlative to obstructive sleep apnea. So, yeah, it's very important that it's addressed and treated.
And if people don't get their sleep apnea treated, what are some of the effects to their health?
So those comorbidities I just listed, So essentially, what can happen with obstructive sleep apnea, or what does happen with obstructive sleep apnea, is your blood oxygen level desaturates. And once you desaturate below about 90%, things start to happen. To give you an idea of how bad it can be, I mean, we've seen patients down to 47%, which is basically like climbing to the top of Mount Everest every night. So it's just wrecking their whole, cardiopulmonary system. It causes an incredible amount of stress, which causes cortisol to be dumped into you. And essentially those comorbidities I mentioned, they skyrocket. Like the correlation in between hypertension, which is high blood pressure, and obstructive sleep apnea, the correlation is incredibly high. Same thing with stroke. So obviously it can cause a lot of things. We used to kind of not joke, but make the comment in the industry a lot that this stuff looks like it causes everything to cancer, and they actually did a study that shows it can actually cause cancer. So it's something that needs to be treated.
What about family history? How much does that play a factor in terms of sleep apnea?
Family history can play a factor from a couple of angles for sure. Families tend to have metabolic rates that are high or low. So if you've inherited a low metabolic rate, it's going to be more difficult to keep the weight off. So that's going to have a propensity to cause the apnea. Also, body structure. Facially, if the patient's what we face, a long, tall face, regardless of their weight, they're going to have a higher propensity to have apnea. That's kind of the patient category we see a lot of times. Females that weigh 100 to 115 pounds, which is no weight issue in those, and they have severe apnea. That's due to facial structure. So yes, there can be an inherited component to it.
Hearing you speak about sleep apnea, it makes me think about so many autistic people that are not involved in exercise and maybe their nutrition is not the best. How much do you feel like that plays a factor into so many people on the spectrum having sleep apnea?
That's a great question, and I think it plays a huge role. There's a gentleman by the name of William DeVent who was on the original studies to define REM sleep back in 1947. He's actually still around, and he created something called the triumvirate of health, and that's exercise, nutrition, and sleep. And his point was that most people understand at least that they should exercise. Most people understand that they should eat right, but not many understood that they should sleep. But really, to drive your point home, the gentleman who's considered the godfather of sleep literally said those three things, that's the key to health. You have to exercise, you have to have good nutrition, you have to have good sleep. And as far as those of us with Asperger's, yeah, it's a real issue because generally, there's not a lot of exercise going on. The diet tends to be high fat, high sugar, and I've not met anyone yet with Asperger's that doesn't have some kind of sleeping issue, either onset or architecture or latency. So yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, Doug.
Now, recently you have started a nonprofit of your own. How has your work with other businesses, medical and dental startups, prepared you for this?
Well, I think it did in a number of ways. I think it prepared me for understanding the structure of how any business is run, and what that's going to be like on the inside of doing it and growing it and moving it. Also, due to my sleep and dental contacts, it obviously provided me with a great global network of people to reach out to. And then kind of the cherry on top is the guy who's going to, or is CEOing it and CFOing it for me, is a former guy I worked with in a previous company. He was my VP of Finance for North America, and then after we parted, he's been at a nonprofit now for the last 6 years as a chief financial officer. So that whole experience even brought me, together with somebody who's helping with the charity. So I think there was a lot of value.
Now, what is the mission of your nonprofit, and how can others get involved in supporting your mission?
I actually have 6 key points to the nonprofit. The first one is actually research, and it kicks off with a sleep study. What I would like to do is a global cohort sleep study, leveraging my contacts, limited to adult Asperger's patients, and find out answers to those key issues I just asked earlier. just commented on earlier. Basically, people falling asleep, staying asleep, and then having disrupted sleep. So that's going to be one of the key initiatives. I also have a pretty big vision for a self-sustaining community of adult Asperger's folks that we're all living in an area that's independent but has some structure and oversight, and obviously that's a huge project. An annual symposium bringing together educators, patients, industry, and making that at a location that people would love to get together. Actually funding a film based on Asperger's adults for awareness. So, I think one of the big tragedies is when they did The Big Short, and everything with Dr. Burry, they had actual footage of where he discovers and self-diagnoses having Asperger's, and they took it out of the film. I think that's a tragedy because it could have really increased awareness. So I think that there's something that can be done there. And then the final two components are just general community awareness and outreach and train the trainer. So working with adults, parents, kids, schools, and just getting as much information out there that we can. And I believe that there's a lot of value in doing this research and working with adults and then figuring out how we repurpose that for pediatric application. So I can see it kind of as a feedback loop where what they find out about kids can help adults and what we found out about adults can help kids.
Now, you were talking about sleep study research specifically for autistic and people that have Asperger's. Are there any studies out there that are like focusing on that?
Not really. I've been able to find, I believe I found 3 that have anything at all to do with autism, Asperger's, and sleep. This one, again, would be very specific, looking at adults, and we'd want to look for those 3 factors plus apnea. So it's a very specific, designed one. But to directly answer your question, no, the data's not out there, which that's the reason I wanted to do this. One of the first things I did is started looking up sleep and autism Asperger's, and I really couldn't find any or much viable clinical data.
It was interesting you talking earlier about how neurotypical people are at a deficit when we're talking about things like creativity, and I found that to be true in many cases. I've seen some beautiful artwork online that you created, that extremely creative abstract art. What inspires you to create each piece, and will this be in any way connected to your nonprofit?
Starting at the back first, yes, it will be connected to the nonprofit. The way the art came about, honestly, Doug, was very interesting. So I'd never painted a picture in my life, any kind. I did play bass in a band in college and things like that, but not what you consider an overly creative person. And back about 14 months ago, just kind of had this, let's start painting. And it was pretty wild. I started one, and then I realized that I wanted to do more to it before it had dried. So within a very short amount of time, I just kind of automatically created this system where I was doing like 20 of these paintings at once. So I would do them as I finished one, it would go to dry, and I just do them in a circle. And I literally, the old autistic focus kicking in, 8 hours, 12 hours, 16 hours, just doing it like that over and over. And then it's kind of like once I figured that style out, it's gone through just different iterations of how it's evolved. But basically, I don't envision a picture at all before I start. I start, and then it kind of develops as I go. And I often listen to music and actually stem with a palette knife as I'm doing it, which I find both relaxing and it creates some of the art. So it's really just inspired by me listening to some music and just starting to go with colors, and then it just goes in the direction that it's going to go.
That's really fascinating. And for those that want to learn more about the mission of your nonprofit, how would they go about doing so?
The easiest way is probably to go to the foundation's website. It is a 501(c)(3) full nonprofit, so we're .org, and it is onthespectrumfoundation.org. If they happen to hit .com, it'll point back to .org. and we are just in the process of launching it. So it is out there, and it's going to become a lot more robust over the coming weeks and months.
Well, John, I really appreciated the conversation. Thanks so much, and keep up the good work.
Thank you very much, Doug. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to today's episode, and thanks to John for the conversation. Autism Personal Coach looks forward in learning about all the sleep studies that John does in the future and helping out in any way we can. Modern life can be challenging for anyone. When you're autistic, the world isn't designed with your unique traits in mind, and everyday demands can feel insurmountable. At Autism Personal Coach, we celebrate neurodiversity by empowering adults and teens to be the best versions of their authentic selves. The people we serve are the real experts. We're here to help their goals become a reality. To get an autism coach for a loved one or yourself to achieve your goals or dreams, email doug.bletcher@autismpersonalcoach.com or call or text 216-336-5889 and request a coach today. On the next episode of Autism Stories, we will talk with Haley Moss and Amy Guetta about the Americans with Disabilities Act 29 years later. Talk to you then.
Sometimes we wish we were normal. We hope you understand. This is not fun at all. There are some times we fear we can't improve. Everyone around us has said that we've improved, taking longer to study, longer to learn. It also takes us longer to complete tasks at hand. Having Asperger's, not making sense. Our actions are different.